The wind in Koalou didn't whisper. It howled. Traoré, coarse, restless. President Ibrahim Traoré stood at the edge of the disputed zone, boots pressed into cracked earth. Beside him, a line of officers scanned the horizon, where Benin's hills met Burkina Faso's northern ridge. No flag flew here, just silence, tension, and history. "This land has always been ours," said Colonel Bayo, pointing toward a distant tree line. But the French drew maps that disagreed. Ibrahim didn't answer. He was thinking, not about trees or treaties, but about the meeting he had walked out of in Paris just days earlier. That meeting wasn't about peace. It was a warning. Koalou wasn't a war zone, not yet, but the region had become a magnet for smugglers, extremists, and now foreign agents. For decades, the border between Benin and Burkina Faso had been a forgotten zone. But when gold was discovered in shallow veins beneath Koalou's rocky surface, everything changed. A French-backed mining company, Lutex Corp, began operating through Benin without official clearance from the Burkinabe government. They claimed to be on the Beninese side. Satellite data said otherwise. Now unmarked drones buzzed over villages at night. Farmers vanished, and 2 Burkinabe gendarmes had been killed in an accidental crossfire. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré met with Madame Coulibaly, his national security advisor. "They're not just testing the border," she said. "They're testing you." Traoré raised an eyebrow. "They want to know if we'll let them write history again with bulldozers and blueprints." He exhaled slowly. "And what does Paris say?" "They deny involvement, but Lutex Corp's board includes 2 former French diplomats and a Shell subsidiary based in Marseille and Benin. They're playing dumb. But we intercepted a phone call from a French attaché telling their interior minister, quote, 'Keep the doors open. We'll handle the noise.'" Traoré's jaw clenched. At 2 a.m. the next morning, he called Captain Yero. "I want eyes on Koalou," he said, "and not just drones. People, locals, old rebels, traitors, every whisper, every truck, every bribe. I want it on my desk." "Yes, sir. And Yero," he added, "if we confirm foreign boots on our soil, I'm not calling Geneva. I'm going there myself." Meanwhile, in Paris, the foreign ministry buzzed with activity. Lutex Corp had already received satellite support from a French military contractor. A team of geological consultants had been inserted, ex-French Legion, now wearing civilian vests. "The president of Burkina Faso is not cooperating," one official said. "He's not supposed to cooperate," replied another. "He's supposed to collapse." But Traoré wasn't collapsing. Instead, he was consolidating. He called a closed-door meeting with leaders from Mali and Niger, both recently aligned with Burkina Faso in the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. The topic, Koalou, "We need to draw a line," he told them. "Not just on the map, but in policy. If they dig 1 inch into our sovereignty, we respond, united." Mali's Doumbia nodded. Niger's Samari, silent for most of the discussion, finally spoke. "They won't stop with gold," he said. "Tomorrow it's lithium, then water, then whatever else we don't sell them." "So we don't sell," Traoré replied. "We defend." Back at the border, reports rolled in fast. Yero's operatives identified at least 4 foreign operatives coordinating with Beninese guards. A series of satellite photos showed military-grade excavation equipment moving through Koalou at night. Then the tipping point. A local school teacher named Maman Issouf filmed a short video on his old phone. It showed a convoy of French-speaking security personnel escorting Lutex Corp trucks across a patch of Burkinabe land. He posted it to a private WhatsApp group. Within 2 hours, it hit Twitter. Within 6, it hit Al Jazeera. And by sunset, #Koalou was trending worldwide. Traoré watched the footage from his private war room. He said nothing for a full minute, then called the French ambassador. Coulibaly looked up. "Statement or demand?" "Summon," he said. The next morning, the French ambassador arrived at the presidential palace. She was polished, diplomatic, and late by exactly 7 minutes. A gesture, no doubt. "I hope we can clear up this confusion," she said as she sat down. "There is no confusion," Traoré replied. "We caught your contractors on our soil. Mr. President, Koalou's boundaries are fluid. He leaned forward. Our patience isn't. She smiled thinly. Surely we can avoid unnecessary tension. We're already in it, he said. We just haven't made it official yet. Outside, tanks began to move toward the eastern corridor. Not for war, but not for decoration either. The red line was drawn, and the world had just been dared to cross it. Midnight in Ouagadougou felt heavier than usual. President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in the map room, a single desk lamp casting shadows across borders drawn in ink decades before his birth. He traced the Koalou line with his finger, the so-called fluid boundary the French ambassador had tried to downplay. The irony stung. France had drawn these lines during colonial rule. Now their corporations were pretending they didn't exist. A knock broke the silence. Captain Yero entered quietly, placing a sealed dossier on the table. This just came in. Satellite footage. We picked up heat signatures. 27 vehicles moved through Koalou last night. Trucks? Armored. Traoré didn't flinch. Is there a French flag? No, but some of the mercs were wearing patches. Old Legion insignia, faded but there. Private contractors? Yero nodded. Likely ex-military. No official status, but definitely French. Traoré leaned back. They want to provoke without being blamed. And if we respond? Yero asked. They'll say we fired first. Across the border in Cotonou, Benin's leadership played a careful hand. President Patrice Zensu had remained silent, offering no comment, no apology, no confirmation. But diplomatic leaks told a different story. A French attaché had promised Zensu full infrastructure support, loan forgiveness, and a 1.2 billion euro investment in Benin's port expansion if he allowed Lutex Corp uninterrupted access to Koalou for 12 months. 12 months to strip the land bare and walk away. Back in Paris, the Quai d'Orsay was fuming. Traoré had not only summoned the French ambassador, he had released footage of the Koalou incursion to a joint press conference with Mali and Niger, calling it theft in broad daylight, protected by foreign suits and local silence. The ambassador's office scrambled to respond. This is dangerous rhetoric, a press release read. President Traoré is destabilizing the region. But the streets of Ouagadougou saw it differently. Thousands marched downtown, chanting not 1 inch of Koalou is ours, we remember. In the presidential palace, Madame Koulibaly entered the situation room holding a folder of intercepted communications. French embassy staff met with a representative from Lutex Corp at a private residence. Topic: deniability. They're preparing a narrative, Traoré said. We're the aggressors. They're just businessmen caught in politics. She nodded. They're also lobbying the African Union to mediate. Translation: delay us while they extract. Traoré stood and walked to the window. Then we escalate, without firing a shot. That evening, Traoré went live on national television, but not from the palace. From Koalou, standing in front of a small, dusty primary school less than 2 kilometers from the encroaching zone. He looked directly into the camera. This is not just about gold, it's about ghosts. He paused, letting the silence carry weight. For decades, foreign hands drew our borders, mined our land, and told us it was cooperation. Now they return without asking, drilling without consent, and hiding behind governments too afraid to say no. The camera zoomed out slightly to show village elders standing behind him. Koalou belongs to the children who study in this school, not to shareholders in Paris. The speech sent shockwaves. In Bamako, Niamey, and Accra, local leaders voiced support. But in Brussels, alarm bells rang. The EU Commission called for urgent dialogue. France requested a closed-door meeting at the UN. And across social media, hashtags trended worldwide. #Koalou crisis, #Traoré speaks for us all. But the backlash wasn't just diplomatic. 3 days later, a cyber attack struck the Ministry of Finance in Ouagadougou. Servers crashed, bank transfers were frozen, key databases were compromised. The source? A complex web of proxies routed through Eastern Europe and one military-grade node, tied to a cybersecurity firm headquartered in Marseille. Yero stormed into the palace. They hit us, hard. It wasn't amateurs. Traoré remained calm. Then it's official, he said. They've moved from diplomacy to sabotage. Should we respond in kind? No, we respond with law. The next morning, the Burkina Faso Supreme Court issued an emergency injunction, banning Lutex Corp from operating within 100 kilometers of Koalou. Failure to comply would result in immediate asset seizure and criminal charges. France responded by freezing all development aid. Then came the veiled threat, a confidential cable from the French Ministry of Defense. We advise caution. Unilateral action could jeopardize regional security partnerships. Translation: back off, or you'll stand alone. But Traoré wasn't alone. In a private call with Mali's President DOMITA and Niger's General Samari, the three leaders made a decision: deploy a joint AES observation force to Koalou, neutral uniforms, no weapons raised, just boots, binoculars, and boundary lines. And when they landed, they brought cameras. The images went viral. African soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder at the Koalou line, French trucks halted behind makeshift checkpoints, children waving AES flags near the school Traoré had visited. It was no longer a local issue. It was a continental stand. In Paris, President Lévy Duclerc met with his defense advisors behind closed doors. This cannot become the next Congo, he warned. But it already had. Only this time, the script was flipped. The Africans weren't asking for help. They were issuing ultimatums. Back in Koalou, Traoré stood before a map etched in red. Euro leaned in. Paris won't go silent. They'll come again, another way. Let them, Traoré said. He picked up a pen. And let's be ready with something louder than protests. What? Proof. He circled a name on the map. Let's expose who's really pulling the strings.
It started with a thumb drive, unlabeled, untraceable, hand-delivered by a masked informant to Burkina Faso's intelligence command post in the early hours of Monday. Inside it, a series of decrypted emails, internal Lutex Corp memos, and satellite time logs, all tied to a confidential plan named Carte Blanche. The files detailed a multi-stage operation coordinated between Lutex Corp, French intelligence contractors, and Beninese border agents. Its objective? Establish temporary mining zones in Koalou's secure French economic access via backdoor Benin diplomacy. Undermine President Ibrahim Traoré's political credibility via Western media leaks, and if all failed, support an internal coup through key opposition elements. Captain Euro stared at the screen in disbelief. This isn't infiltration, he said. It's colonialism version 2.0. President Traoré stood silent as Koulibaly read line 42 aloud. We expect full denial capabilities through diplomatic channels. Should the Burkinabe government escalate, invoke instability concerns and EU mediation. He leaned forward slowly, then said one word. Release it, sir? Euro blinked. I want every document published, all of it. No redactions. Let the world see what France calls cooperation. That evening, Burkina Faso's government posted the files to an official AES transparency portal. Every document, every voice memo, every map, no spin, just facts. Within hours, hashtags exploded across social media. #Carte Blanche files, #Koalou's truth, #France. Exposed. Even neutral outlets like Reuters and The Guardian covered it with headlines like Burkina Faso declassifies files alleging French economic espionage. Koalou crisis escalates into major diplomatic showdown. But in Paris, there was no press conference, just closed doors, raised voices, and red faces. In a luxury flat near the Champs-Élysées, James Ellison, one of the architects of Carte Blanche, hurriedly packed a suitcase. He had read the leaks. He knew his name was in them. And worse, so was the wire transfer. 250,000 euros, paid from a Lutex Corp account to a Beninese minister for logistical facilitation. Proof. Signed, stamped, undeniable. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré convened a midnight war council. Yero Koulibaly and AES military liaisons sat around a digital table as satellite maps rotated overhead. Our objectives are clear, the president said.
We will not launch a war, but we will defend this border with more than words. He tapped the map. I want 3 layers of perimeter: military, civilian observers, and media. Yarrow leaned in. Media? Yes, if a shot is fired, the world will see who fired first. At sunrise, over 20 international journalists were escorted to AES Forward Command in Koalou. They were shown security briefings, introduced to commanders, and given open access to observe all non-sensitive operations. Transparency was the new weapon, and it worked. CNN broadcast live from the Koalou school. Al Jazeera ran a special segment titled Gold, Borders and Betrayal, France's Shadow War in West Africa. Even BBC admitted, the files, if authentic, represent a major embarrassment for Paris. And in cities across West Africa, student protests erupted in solidarity with Burkina Faso. Chants of Koalou belongs to us rang out in Lagos, Accra, and Abidjan. But Paris was not idle. That night, an emergency session convened at the Élysée Palace. President Lévi Duclerc, stone-faced, faced his national security team. This Traoré problem is no longer about a border, he said. It's about influence, image, light. If we lose this narrative, we lose West Africa. What do you suggest? A general asked. We cut his air. Economic sanctions. Oh, rumors. Allegations. Pressure. He looked out the window. Let's make him defend himself until he cracks. The next morning, French state media ran anonymous reports alleging human rights abuses in AES camps near Koalou. One headline read, Burkinabe soldiers accused of abusing minors in conflict zone. No evidence, no sources, just fuel. Soon after, Amnesty International received an anonymous tip and began a rapid inquiry. The narrative machine was roaring back. Yarrow slammed the report on Traoré's desk. They're creating fog. Enough to slow down support and delay our advance. Koulaboli added, we fight facts with facts, Ibrahim said calmly. Let's invite observers, Red Cross, UN reps, regional envoys, and France. We don't answer their lies, he said. We just shine lights where they hoped we wouldn't. Hours later, satellite footage was released publicly, showing AES soldiers escorting displaced villagers to safety, not detaining them. Independent NGOs confirmed the footage's accuracy. The narrative attack wobbled, but something darker followed. At 3:14 a.m., a convoy transporting humanitarian aid to Koalou was attacked by unknown militants near the border. 2 were killed, 5 injured. The attackers wore no insignia, but one body was recovered, a foreign national, ex-French Foreign Legion. His fingerprints matched files from the carte blanche leaks. This was no longer a scandal. It was a battlefield. Traoré stood before the AES Joint Command and spoke plainly. We did not ask for this war. We asked for respect. He paused, but we were given betrayal. Mercenaries, lies, threats. The room was silent. He turned toward the cameras now ever present in the camp. Shall we have shown restraint? We have offered proof, but if one more bullet is fired in our territory, there will be consequences. Not speeches, consequences. And for the first time, even the foreign press didn't call it dramatic. They called it justified. The desert wind had shifted. At Koalou Forward Command, dust blew in bursts across the AES compound, coating boots, helmets, and satellite dishes. But inside the main tent, everything was clear. President Ibrahim Traoré stood at the center of a real-time intelligence briefing, surrounded by live feeds, drone visuals, and 3 stunned analysts. This is confirmed? He asked. Yarrow nodded grimly. Yes, sir. The attack last night wasn't rogue militants. It was a tactical squad, trained, coordinated. Satellite ping shows they crossed over from the Beninese side 2 hours before the strike. Uniforms? Civilian disguise. But one body had Legionnaire tattoos. Another wore a comm device synced to a French encrypted channel. Traoré looked up, so they escalated. And now, they're exposed. Across West Africa, the leaked satellite footage of the ambush raced across networks like fire across dry grass. It showed everything. The foreign squad crossing at night, the assault on the aid convoy, and the exact coordinates inside Burkinabe territory. Hashtags resurfaced. #France. In Koalou #expose. The ghosts #Africa. Under siege. This time, even European outlets struggled to spin it. But in Paris, President Traoré chose silence. No denial, no statement, just pressure. French banks began freezing AES-related transactions. 2 EU development programs in Burkina Faso were suspended pending review. And in Washington, a senior official called the AES approach reckless adventurism. But no one could erase the facts. Koalou wasn't just contested land anymore. It was the line between control and resistance. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, a resolution was drafted by France, calling for a temporary peacekeeping buffer zone in the Koalou region, led by international troops. Translation: let us in. We'll police the line we tried to steal. Traoré was livid. He called Koulibaly, Yero, and the AES delegation into a midnight session. They want to walk into our home with boots and blue helmets, he said. They want us to say thank you while they clean their fingerprints. So we veto it? Koulibaly asked. No, Traoré said. We show them what real peacekeeping looks like. The next morning, Traoré did the unexpected. He flew without announcement to Niamey and Bamako, then to Lomé and Accra. In 48 hours, he met 5 West African presidents, and he left each one with 2 things. 1. A dossier on France's operation in Koalou. 2. A request for joint regional enforcement of the Koalou border under African control. No foreign troops, just African resolve, he said. And incredibly, 4 of the 5 agreed. The 5th said he would monitor closely. Days later, AES announced the Regional Border Security Initiative, RBSI, a new African-led effort to protect disputed or vulnerable territories without Western intervention. With it came the Koalou Declaration. No land on African soil shall be managed, mediated or militarized without African consent. The West scoffed, but the continent listened. In Paris, the backlash intensified. Lutex Corp CEO was subpoenaed in Burkina Faso. Former diplomats were named in legal documents. A French opposition senator demanded an investigation, saying, "Have we learned nothing since Françafrique? Are we still playing empire in 2025?" And yet, deep inside France's security apparatus, new moves were underway. Not overt, not military, but psychological. In the capital of Ouagadougou, an anonymous letter arrived at the National Assembly. It contained photos of Traoré's family, his mother, his sister, and a niece. They had been taken outside their homes. Each photo came with a timestamp and a message. Everyone has pressure points. Yero found the envelope first. He brought it straight to the president. Traoré stared at it for a long time. Then slowly he placed it into a metal tray and lit it on fire. "We don't fold," he said, but they just raised the stakes. That evening he held a private meeting with his inner circle. "I need security increased for every member of my family, immediate and extended." Yero nodded. "Already done." And the French ambassador, "She's called twice, wants to meet. Let her wait." Instead, Traoré appeared unexpectedly at a press event for Koalou's regional rebuilding plan. He spoke plainly, without notes. "They have tried maps, mines, mercenaries, money, media. Now they try fear." He paused, "But we will not be moved." He lifted a small container of Koalou sand. "This earth has no flag but ours." The next day, Burkina Faso filed official charges in the International Criminal Court against Lutex Corp executives and unnamed foreign actors for economic sabotage, conspiracy, and cross-border aggression. Legal experts scoffed. But in a historic first, 3 other West African nations co-signed the complaint. The ICC had no choice but to accept it. That night, AES trucks rolled into Koalou, not with weapons, but with engineers, doctors, and teachers. They began building the first Koalou Border Academy, a civilian-run education and security institution for youth from all surrounding regions. CNN ran the headline, "Burkina Faso answers invasion with innovation," and the message was clear. This wasn't about land anymore. It was about legacy. From a window inside the French embassy in Cotonou, a former intelligence officer watched the footage silently. He turned to his handler. "You know we lost, right?" The handler shook his head. "Not yet." And he lifted a phone. "We still have one play left." Back in Ouagadougou, Yero's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then went cold. He turned to Traoré. "Sir, your niece. She's missing." The news hit like a blade through the capital. President Ibrahim Traoré's niece, Eoa Traoré, 19 years old, a university student, had vanished. No note, no demands, no camera footage, just silence. Captain Yero stood in the war room, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot. "We've locked the city, borders sealed, airports frozen. Every traffic cam is being reviewed." "Was it random?" Toulibaly asked. "No," Traoré said coldly. "It was precise. Eoa wasn't a public figure. She'd never appeared at events, never done interviews, which meant they'd been watching. That same night, a message appeared on a secure government terminal. No sender, no trace, just text. "Back off Koalou, or she dies. You have 48 hours. Attached a photo. Eoa, blindfolded, alive. Traoré stared at it for a long time. Then he turned to Yero. "Don't leak this. Don't negotiate. Just find her." But finding her wasn't easy. The trail was faint. Whoever had taken her knew AES systems. They moved between weak spots, used public vehicles, masked their thermal trails, but then a break. One of the analysts caught an anomaly. A traffic cam briefly blacked out for 13 seconds on Route 5, near an old logistics hangar. Yero rerouted drones. Within 2 hours, they found it. An abandoned French-built warehouse. Heat signatures inside. By sunrise, AES special forces surrounded the compound. They moved in silently, synchronizing entry. What they found inside wasn't just a way, it was proof. Hard drives, encrypted files, photos, tactical maps of AES troops in Koalou, handwritten notes in French, and in a small reinforced room, Eoa, tied but unharmed. She blinked up at them, defiant. "Well, they told me to write a statement," she whispered. I spat on it. President Traoré arrived at the facility an hour later. He didn't go in right away. He stood outside, staring at the dusty building. "Oh, this is what fear looks like," he muttered. Quiet, calculated, cowardly. Eoa stepped out under guard. When she saw him, she ran forward. They embraced. Well, but Traoré's face was steel. He turned to Yero. "Send the files to every African head of state. No commentary, just facts." That afternoon, EES released a short press briefing. "We confirm a foreign-backed abduction plot targeting the Burkina Faso president's family. But the victim is safe. The perpetrators have been identified." The international community waited for names. Traoré gave none, but he didn't need to. The world had read the leaked files. The fingerprints were already public, and in France, denial became impossible. An arrest warrant was issued in Burkina Faso for James Ellison, the former Lutex Corp advisor turned covert strategist. Interpol hesitated, but within 48 hours, Ellison had disappeared, vanished from hotels, from meetings, from maps. France claimed to know nothing. Traoré knew better, but instead of retaliating, he delivered a speech, not on television, but from Koalou itself. He stood on newly paved ground, where the Koalou Border Academy was rising from the soil. Thousands gathered, children, soldiers, elders, teachers, and the press was watching. "I was asked to back down," he began, "to abandon this land, to abandon my family, to abandon this continent's dignity." He paused. I refused. The crowd was silent. They sent machines. We sent witnesses. They sent lies. We sent light. They sent shadows. We stood in the sun. He held up the sand again. "This is not just Koalou. It's every border redrawn without our voice. It's every deal signed in someone else's language. It's every flag that waved over us like a leash." The crowd erupted. In Paris, foreign policy analysts stared at the footage in stunned silence. One headline from Le Monde read, "Traoré turned a kidnapping into a revolution." CNN followed with, "France fumbles. Traoré rises." Even the BBC called it a victory without gunfire. 3 weeks later, the Koalou Treaty was signed. Not in Geneva, not in Paris, But in Ouagadougou, 10 African nations signed on. It declared all resource zones must be transparently licensed, all borders respected as drawn by independent commissions, all military actions by foreign contractors banned without sovereign consent, and most critically, no development aid tied to territorial compromise. The West objected. The continent cheered. But the greatest moment came not in policy, but in ceremony. Ibrahim Traoré stood on stage at the Koalou school opening, now renamed the Dignity Academy. She didn't speak long, just one sentence. They thought they could bury the truth. But we are the seed. Later that night, Ibrahim and Yero sat beneath the stars. You think they're done? Yero asked. Traoré shook his head. No, they'll try again. Another way. Another name. Then what? Then what? Then what? Then we do what we always do. He sipped his tea. We stand the line. In the silence, the wind carried laughter from the Koalou children. And from that dust, something new rose. Not just defiance, not just a treaty, but a truth. That Africa will not be shaped by those who draw borders in ink, but by those who defend them in blood, in courage, and in love.